Steph. This welcome to Western Port Secondary College is an acknowledgement of country, but it's also quite linked to our context at the college, where we work in quite a limited diversity of cultural backgrounds and exposure for our young people. So if you come with me on this journey just for a moment, I'll take you through our welcome to Western Port. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I am currently working today on the lands of the Bunurong people. I'd like to welcome everyone to Western Port Secondary College. We acknowledge and respect the first people of our country, locally the Bunurong people, and their relationship with the land and environment. We undertake to respect and take care of the land, plants, animals and people within it. Wominjeka, hello and welcome. Wominjeka is actually loosely translated, as I'm not qualified to do this properly, but as come with purpose, which I think is relevant for today. We respectfully acknowledge the diversity, background and experiences of all people involved in our college, staff, students and visitors. We undertake to work together positively, productively and respectfully, irrespective of race, gender, cultural differences, religion, orientation or personal beliefs. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks very much. It's lovely to hear that sentiment. We're with a fantastic group of people today. This is the third in our 3 Zoom visits, as we call them. We love to do our visits in person when we can, and as everyone knows, that's a thing of the past for the time being, but hopefully may come back again. Perhaps in 4th term, we'll see how things play out. I hope everyone's going okay in this time. It's not great for anyone. I think everyone's dealing with it as best they can. It's certainly hard for the schools, and I don't think we want to forget that as we're speaking to the schools. And I really thank all of our speakers today very sincerely, because everyone's under a lot of stress, and it's a bit hard to have a happy smiley face, I think, at this time. Thanks to everyone who's here, our donors, we love you, and we couldn't do any of this without you. We've got some members of our board here today, which is wonderful. Perhaps I'll particularly welcome them, and of course members of the Victorian government. We are thrilled to have a partnership with the Victorian government through their Working in Place initiative. We're a place-based foundation. We're all about working in place. As we get deeper and deeper into the communities that we work with on the Mornington Peninsula, things only get better and things seem more and more positive. And today we're here to meet some really outstanding people, absolutely fabulous people who are the team behind Elevate. Elevate is the 3rd part of the Western Port Learning Guarantee, which is slowly and magnificently forming in the Western Port community, and I will let our speakers tell you about it. I get the privilege of sitting on the steering committees and hearing about it firsthand, but actually don't do anything as part of it. So we'll hear from the people who do it. We've got Chris Quinn, who you've just heard from. Chris is the principal of Western Port Secondary. We have David Roycroft, principal of Oakwood School. We have Michelle Zinachenko, who is our Elevate coordinator. Cheryl Chappell, we call Cheryl our MPF education consultant, probably a wonderful asset to MPF, helps us with all the education work we do. And we also have Matt Bodley. Matt is, as of very recently, assistant principal at Western Port Secondary College. So let's talk about Elevate, and perhaps I'll hand over to Chris to start us off and set the scene. Then we'll hear from David, Cheryl and Michelle. But please, this isn't about just talking at you, this is about talking with you, and we really welcome any feedback, any communication, any questions, either in between speakers or when we've heard from the 4 of them. You can put up the virtual hand or put something in the chat box, and we'll manage it from there. But please, it's an informal conversation and there's no silly question. Chris.
Thanks very much, Steph. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate the support that we've received from the Foundation for a number of years now, but also your interest in what we see as really critical work for our school and our community. And the Western Port Learning Guarantee certainly encapsulates the commitment that we have as a secondary school with our feeder primary schools to make sure we look after all the young people in the community of Hastings, and which extends a little bit broader than that, but as our primary feeder schools coming in from there. So what I thought I'd do is just refresh those who've heard it before, and for those who are new today, just a little bit about the Western Port Learning Guarantee history, just for a moment. Take you back to my previous mentor and principal of the school, Michael Devine, had an idea about how we could change community more broadly with the work that the secondary school is positioned to do as the only secondary school in government secondary school in Hastings, and that we would partner with a couple of primary schools and have a look at a journey and how we could change outcomes for young people. It really started with understanding the position the school was in. It was absolutely a need to be turned around school. It was, viability was a real issue. We had young people that were not choosing our school as their school of choice and going to anywhere but. We had Year 7 numbers at about 64 around about 2014-15. So the viability of the school was a real issue. So we had a look at the data of the students coming into the school, recognised that with a number of key data sets, there's about 70% of kids who were coming to us behind the expected level in literacy and numeracy. So to make up that gap is a significant challenge. And with that level of students being behind comes with a level of disengagement as well. So we're inheriting disengagement from our primary schools, who, not through lack of trying and effort and care, but they just weren't hitting the mark with our young people. And the gap was really big for us to pick up. So we through a course of events, we ended up over and checked out the Harlem Children's Zone in the US and saw what they were doing about place-based approaches within a community, and we thought we've got to go down to the primary schools and work with them closely. So you may have heard of No Limits, you may have heard of our Learning Enhancement Program, which is down in our primary schools about getting kids in the best condition they can to be coming through to Western Port Secondary College, academically and from a wellbeing perspective, because we know that there's a lot of factors that are outside of the control of the school that are in the home and community lives of our young people. So in doing that, we started really small. We've built that to quite an effective program that's got deliberate staff working in those primary schools, which is a big part of the Western Port Learning Guarantee. As well as doing that, we also recognise that within our school, we've got these young people. They've come to us in the condition that they are in, both academic and from a wellbeing wraparound supports perspective. And we need to do everything that we can. And the Western Port Learning Guarantee has a tagline of whatever it takes. And for me, the Elevate program is the Western Port aspect of the whatever it takes approach. And we started off identifying that there were a number of young people who were high level of absences, high level of disengagement that were disrupting classes, causing issues around our school, and a high level of disengagement that weren't coming to the school, and then disengagement that sits within our classrooms just silently, disengaged but passively being part of the program, and that we certainly needed to do everything that we could to address that. So we started off by then approaching David. Michael, myself and David had a conversation about what that could look like in partnering with Oakwood who work, and David's going to tell you a little bit about their story far more better than I can, around the work that they do for our young people who have left mainstream education. And we were working on how could, and it's a bit of David's passion about how secondary schools can do this well themselves, is how we could keep our young people within our school and not lost to needing programs to re-engage them, because mainstream has the capacity to then link them into a whole lot of programs that we do have. So we set about that with David in a differentiated school improvement project funded by the department. David was kind to give us the largest portion of that funding to support the staff member to lead the program. We started off with David's advice to make it a learning program, to make it focused on academics, to make it about if you get the learning right for our young people, then the behaviour will flow in tow behind that because they're engaged. So we started off with that approach. We realised very quickly that was difficult with finding the exact right staff member to do that, and we changed and pivoted a couple of times and have changed staff members to where we sit today with Zinni, who we'll hear today about the work that she's undertaken in her time in that role, and the background that she's got, which has been really beneficial to the program. What we found is that we put that in place, and we had a number of young people who we targeted around their high level of absences and their level of disengagement to get them back into mainstream, get them linked to mainstream school. Some of the numbers that highlight the issue that we've got, as I've said, 70% of our kids are entering behind expected level. That's changed slightly. We're doing some better work in that space, but that was the challenge we were tackling. We still have, we've got about 18 kids that Zinni works with in the program, and you'll hear some case studies and a little bit of work that's gone on for those particular young people. But the work that we've identified in working closely with David is that the impact around Elevate is for 18 kids at the moment, and that's been really solid work, which has got those kids linked back into education and not lost to the system, which is amazing. But the work that has extended from that has identified from our steering committee that we need to change practice within mainstream to get kids engaged before they get to the point of being needing Elevate programs and needing Oakwood programs. And we have put in place a number of initiatives that have changed that. So we've got a inclusion team now that maps kids every 3 weeks and assesses their tiers of vulnerability, and then a team that send supports down to year levels to make sure that our tier 1, tier 2 kids don't end up as tier 3 kids needing specialised programs like Elevate. We've implemented the Berry Street education model as a result of the advice from David around a trauma-informed practice that's needed within secondary schools, particularly in our zone and with the students that come to us. And that's changed all of our mainstream approaches, which is emerging. It's certainly not perfect. We certainly don't have all of the pieces of the puzzle right and implemented with fidelity yet, but we're certainly on the way to. We've got a SWPBS process, which is about school-wide positive behaviour management. We're looking at curriculum architecture and how our architecture is skills-based and assesses kids and really engages them in their learning. We're going to focus through the department's initiative of funding disability and inclusion around differentiation, which is being implemented to build capacity of our staff to really effectively differentiate. We've also got an outreach program which picks up young people who are even beyond David's capacity to reach, who are been in the youth justice system and are linked back in through Navigator and programs for significant disengagement that just won't engage with a setting like even Oakwood to some extent. So some of our numbers that really highlight the need that's still certainly there for programs like Elevate. Our absences at the moment, we've got 22.3 days per student on average. And we have some kids that come every day. So there's some that are significantly high absence rates that is certainly a challenge for us. Zinni and her program have engaged some of the most disengaged high absence kids that would make that data even more significant. Some of our other data that we're trying to tackle is around retention. What we have currently is from year 7 to year 12, we have 46% of kids that would start year 7 that will still be there in year 12. So those kids along the way that aren't in that number are in some ways positive pathways. Some are apprenticeships, some are great outcomes, and some are certainly not. And it is still a piece of work for us to retain our kids within our school, but our eyes are on this number and our eyes are on the work that we've got to do. Some impact that we have been able to have that shows in the time we've been implementing this is between 2016 and 2019. Our retention of kids between year 7 and year 10, so before they get to their senior certificate, we're sitting at 66% of young people. So as I said before, some will go off to apprenticeships after that. So it's hard to work out positive pathways and to explain that right now. But between 2018 and of 2021, coming into this year, we've been able to increase that retention figure to 84% of young people from year 7 to year 10 still engaged at our school. So that is some level of impact of not just Elevate itself, and say that with the most respect to our program and the work that we do, because it is really pivotal, but it has had significant impact on the rest of our school. And I think that's the big message that there's 677 kids in our school, 18 of them are in Elevate, and the rest of them are benefiting from the work that Elevate has certainly identified. In our steering committee, we have really robust discussions about, well, what does that mean to do this work in Elevate? What are your teachers doing? What are we doing around individual education plans and differentiation for our young people to make sure that their learning is really targeted? So I can't underestimate or understate that amount of work that still needs to happen, or that the impact that this is having on our community more broadly in that piece at the secondary level to really target our young people and keep them engaged to a positive pathway, which is long-term work for us still. But today you'll hear a little bit from David about how Oakwood has really made that impact. You'll hear a little bit from Zinni about how the program's actually making a difference to the young people within there. And then also from a global perspective, us to be able to answer any questions that you might have about the work that we do, and dig a little deeper and help you better understand any aspects of this or the impact that it's having. But again, I'm going to finish up there and just thank you for joining us today and being part of this story. We love sharing it. We love sharing it with the foundation, with anyone linked to it, with other secondary schools that have visited us. And it's certainly something that we think we can. We think we've got a model which is always being refined, but we think we've got something that is interesting and should be of interest to other secondary schools to be able to make a difference and keep their young people linked to their mainstream setting, particularly in disadvantaged communities like ours, where we've got arguably one of the most disadvantaged communities and pockets in Victoria right on our doorstep. So all of this work is so important for our community more broadly, but particularly our most vulnerable families and young people that come to our school.
Thanks, Chris. That's a fantastic summary, and I think it reminds us of why the MPF is here, and that is indeed because there is such a juxtaposition of those in this sort of situation and people who are far different to that, and a lot of that is not we're not fully aware of it, and part of our role is to raise awareness of that as well as to support the great work that's happening on the ground. So David, people might not really be aware of what Oakwood School is, which you could help us with that. But I think Chris has given us a great introduction into how it's infiltrating the mainstream, and really what's the bigger picture here for you?
So hi everyone, I'm David Roycroft. I'm principal of Oakwood School, and I've actually on our agenda I've been given 10 minutes to talk to you about the work that we do. And I feel like I've got 10 hours of words in my head. So I've got to sort of filter through that as we go and tell you a little bit about our work. First of all, I'm the principal of the school. I see myself as a teacher. Believe it or not, I know you can't tell by looking at my face, but I've been a teacher for 45 years. And this work that we're doing with Western Port is some of the most exciting work that I've done for a long time. A little bit about me, so a teacher, principal. I've been a principal for over 20 years, and before that I was assistant principal for 10 years. So nearly 30 years in running schools. So I feel like I know a little bit about schools. 20 years ago I was asked to start a new school, a new secondary school. So one thing for me to say is I'm working here with disengaged young people. But for most of my career, I've been working in mainstream schools, in mainstream secondary schools. So 20 years ago, I was asked to start a new school in Carrum Downs Secondary College. I did that for 6 years. And then I was asked to do this new job, which is to start a school for kids who have disengaged from school, which was an interesting concept. And that's Oakwood School's been going now 11 years. It's a government school, government secondary school. And the criteria for enrolment is to be not in school. So an interesting concept. The regional director was distressed, I think, about the number of kids who weren't in school, and he wanted to have a response for that. And that's what Oakwood School became. Most people, when they think about disengaged kids, think about naughty kids, because that's how our kids present. They're the naughty kids. You know, if you were my family and you're walking down the street, you would probably cross the road when you saw our kids because you'd think, I don't know what those people are up, what those guys are up to. And one of the things that I've brought to the equation for Chris and Western Port is when our response is not about naughty behaviour. That's what the kids present to us. But our response, we're at schools, our response is about learning. So the whole focus on Oakwood School and the focus of the work that Chris is doing to Elevate is to help students, with young people, with their learning.
I think it will.
Just
turn my camera off to have something to eat before 1.
Now I can hear Cheryl talking.
Cheryl, you're on. Can you go on mute?
I wasn't going to talk for the whole meeting. So we started 11 years ago with a school in Noble Park North. We had 40 students in one site. Now we have over 400 students across all of southeast Melbourne area on 10 different sites. The profile of those kids, remarkably, I think, they're almost exactly 50-50 boys and girls. The students have not been able to be successful at school. They've dropped out of school. You know, my dad would say, tell those kids to pull their socks up and get on with it. Our kids can't do that. If they could have done that, they would have done that when they were in prep. They haven't got the capacity to pull their own socks up and get on with the learning. It's not because they don't want to do it. It's not because they're lazy. It's just that school doesn't work for them. So one of the concepts behind Oakwood School is if school's not working for young people, whose job is it to fix it? It's actually not the kids' job to fix schools. It's the adults' job to do that. So Oakwood School's been set up to make school successful for our young people. We called the school Oakwood School because we want to be a school. When we create a new building, we paint it with creamy paint and red furniture, and we want to have desks and tables and computers. We want kids to feel like they're at school, but we want to make it work for our young people. So the kids, 50-50 boys, girls, probably 10% funded for disability, probably double that who have some sort of a disability that's never been diagnosed. Just under 10% Koori background, just under 10% kids in out of home care. Kids are presenting a long way behind where they'd want to be with their learning. And kids are usually presenting a long way where you'd want them to be with their relationships with the people in school. So the relationships have fallen down with their teachers and with their colleagues, with their fellow students. So the way I see it, our kids have tried to do school, they've turned up, they haven't been able to understand the work, they haven't been able to maintain the friendships. Ask myself, what are they getting out of school? Nothing positive. So when they drop out of school, I think that's a protective mechanism that they find that that's what they've had to do. Anyway, so Oakwood School was created 11 years ago to find these kids and enrol them and bring them back into school and have them meet teachers and begin to do some good learning. However many years ago, maybe 5 years ago, Cheryl talked to me about Western Port Secondary College wanting to do something for kids who are dropping out of school. And I thought, well, that's a good conversation to get involved in because Oakwood School has that expertise. We know how to engage students who have dropped out of school. Our school council has long wanted to think about, okay, we might be doing some great work, or we are doing great work with students who have dropped out of school, but how better would it be if we could meet these young people before they dropped out of school? So that's why I was excited to get involved with a partnership with Western Port Secondary College. And that continues to be why I am excited about this work. Maybe 6 or so years ago, we had an external consultancy do a year-long review of the work of Oakwood School, and they identified about 20 key things that we did that made this work. And one thing that will tell me is this actually looks simple, but it's complicated work. There's a lot of bits that need to slot together for us to be successful. And what we did, led by Cheryl, as the committee, is to look at those 20 elements and decide which of those elements would work in a mainstream school. If we were going to make mainstream work for these kids who are dropping out, which ones would be important. So Chris has mentioned trauma-informed practice. That is the first step in this. So that we need to understand, well, I didn't say earlier that, you know, our students, anxiety, depression, domestic violence, drug and alcohol abuse, criminal behaviour, they're all the things that are happening in their families. And so our students are all coming from a background of developmental trauma based in the family. The way I interpret that is they've been let down by all the adults in their life, their families and their school teachers. So we have suggested to Chris that trauma-informed practice is the first thing to look at, and Chris has implemented that right across the whole school. So we understand the impact of trauma on the development of young people, and therefore we make changes in the school as to how the teachers behave to be able to better include the students. Second one is to focus on learning. When people meet our young people, they always want to focus on their misbehaviour. They always want to teach kids how to behave. You need to do this and say this. What Oakwood School would say, what we say is, we're teachers, we're a school, let's help kids with their learning. And when we help kids with their learning and they have success with that, that actually changes everything for our young people. They can start to see a future for themselves. They can start to see teachers as helping them, and they can start to see school as working. So trauma-informed practice, focus on learning, high expectations for our kids. We want them to be successful and we want them to be going somewhere. And underpinning all that is really positive relationships. So positive relationships, firstly with the young person, and then with their family, and then with their care, the other people, the other professionals involved in their life. And we like to manage that through a care team meeting. So we're looking, as teachers, we're bringing education, we're bringing great teaching to the kids' life, but we want to organise other people as well. So we, you know, if there are drug and alcohol issues, housing issues, poverty issues, we want to put other community members around that table for them to be working on those issues as well. And I think the last part of the puzzle that we said needed to be put in place for Western Port in a mainstream school was, what's the support for the staff? So professional care, professional learning, and effective leadership around the teaching staff, around the support staff working in the school. So Oakwood School, a school that was started to enrol kids who have dropped out of school. We've been going 11 years, we've been very successful, but it is really exciting to be working alongside Chris and looking at Western Port Secondary. For me, as I guess a very experienced principal, to have the opportunity to talk with Chris and talk with the team and look and see what we can do to help our kids remain successful at school.
Thanks, David. I think this is really highlighting the fact this is about a change in the system. It's saying, you know, the system isn't working for everyone. What do we do about it? And I think we ask the people who are doing it what they think it is, and the value of the foundation, the role of the foundation and our funders is that we can listen, ask the questions, and literally have a go. Say, have a go, you know, with funding that supports what you want to do. In the way that you want to do it, and let's see what happens. It's such it's an open conversation we have all the time. We don't try to restrict what happens. We really try to give people the freedom to be the creative people that they are, to really to be the full professionals that they are in their positions. Sometimes it can be extremely frustrating within a system. There's a really important role that philanthropy plays in supporting people to be able to grow out of sight of that system, and it's only when you try new things that it can change. So perhaps we could now hear from you, Zinni, about the work you actually do day to day.
Yeah, sure. Just like David, you probably can't tell by looking at me, but I began my career in education 26 years ago. So I've worked in primary, secondary and special schools. I've been an assistant principal, a sub-school leader, a drama theatre studies teacher, a kind of all sorts here and there, VCAL teacher. So all these sort of skills really come in handy, and what I sort of bring here to Elevate. So working in the Elevate program, we've got myself, I've got a full-time ES who has a background from working in Parkville and in social work. We also have Jamie from Oakwood supporting us 2 days a week, and we have a therapy dog called Norman. So we're quite a good little team over here. The students that we're talking about have come from very different backgrounds. We've got students with trauma backgrounds, students that were school refusers, students with behavioural issues and disengagement, students that have disabilities, that haven't been successful in whatever setting, whether it's a school whether it's a special school or whether it's in mainstream schools, highly anxious students, a lot of mental health issues, a lot of family trauma and family backgrounds and disengaging there. We've got a lot of family violence background, students that have been moving because of that, so they haven't really, that's upset their education. So we've got quite a range of students from very diverse backgrounds that have all impacted on how they haven't been able to learn. And so these students have, some of them have just an Elevate timetable where they come in for sessions each day. Some come in pretty much most of the week. Others have slow introductions of a few hours here and there, and some are also engaging with some mainstream subjects. We're also looking at one student who was with us last year, who's now gone and got an apprenticeship at the age of 15, who would have been totally lost to anything if he hadn't have been in Elevate. He wouldn't have had the sort of scaffolding and support in place to get an apprenticeship. He's doing a diesel apprenticeship. He was actually offered a small engines mechanic apprenticeship, but once he went in there and they actually saw him working, they just said, no, let's go straight up to diesel mechanics. So obviously, because he's so young, the school has to have the connection there and the check-ins and that sort of stuff. So he's still on our radar. And we've also started inductions with 2 other students. And one of those students is just sort of, I don't know where he'd be without Elevate. So this is a young boy, he's year 8 level, 13. He went to a local primary school in the area, very small primary school, was, you know, okay during his primary school time, but when it came to secondary school, Mum wanted to give him a break from the kids in Hastings. She wanted him to move away from Hastings, have a fresh start, because you know, meet some different kids and try remove him from the environment. So he went to a secondary school out of zone because his sister was enrolled there, a very large secondary school, a great secondary school, got nothing against it. But when you're quite a small framed kid, you're going to year 7, which is hard enough for any kid, you've got no mates, you're out of zone, that might not work for you so much. So he went there, he didn't have the best time. He got himself into a lot of mischief because he was trying to win approval, make friends, had sort of nothing going on there, didn't have a great year 7 and hasn't been at school at all this year for year 8. So what do you do when you're not going to school? Well, you sort of hang around with other people that aren't going to school, and you end up spending a lot of time in front of a judge who is saying to you, oh, and are you going to school, mate? And the kid said himself, oh, and the judge would give me like a dirty look when I said I hadn't been at school. So this student, obviously with the support of the sort of justice system and his mother, and realising that he wants to have an education, wants to come back to school. But he can't just go straight holus bolus back into mainstream when he hasn't been at school for, you know, over a year and had no success in education since primary school. And he would have been a great candidate for Oakwood, obviously, but having already connections to peers in the community, and this being his local school and in his zone, this has been a really good opportunity. I've only had 3 one-hour sessions with him. He's been coming in during lockdown and starting to do his testing, but he's really looking forward to getting back into school. And he admits that he's got a lot to learn And he's excited that when he's not doing his learning, he'll be able to engage with his mates at recess and lunch when we're back at school. But then when it comes to catching up on where he's missed out on and that sort of stuff, because he admits I can read okay, but I'm not a great reader and that sort of thing, just to have the support up here. And that's something that's really valuable because he's got that connection to a main school and his peers, but he gets that individual and targeted learning and a way to build relationships with staff and the rest of the school. Our students here have individual learning plans or maps, as they do with Oakwood, which has been really helpful during RFL. So I know what you're probably thinking. RFL, we've got these kids that were school refusers, kids not wanting to come to school, and then the government says, stay home. And so I say, okay, Zinni, game on, level up. What are we going to do here? And it's the relationships that we've built with these students that keep them logging in online or communicating with us. And it's the individual learning that's targeted at them. You know, we've been talking about things with our online learning. If you want to write an argumentative piece about that against somebody else that's criticised Genshin Impact, which apparently is some online game that you play a lot when you're not coming to school, or if you want to do a research project on Juice WRLD, some dreadlocked rapper that you know, passed away or something, that's fine. And we're finding that the students are still engaging, still connecting with us, requesting work, and sometimes they'll say, can I have something fun as well? Absolutely. You know, it can, you know, we're doing an activity, we have like Wellbeing Wednesdays, and we've had some screen-free Fridays. We still, Steph and I, my ES, have still logged on during class times. We've explained to kids what's going on, that they don't need to come into classes, they don't need, but we still log on at the set times that we have. We have consistent times every day for them, 9:15, which is a later home group from the rest of the school because I'm realistic about when my kids are getting out of bed, and at 11:30 and a 2 o'clock session. And we're on these screen-free Fridays and these Wellbeing Wednesdays, the students are still logging on to see us and to connect with us, and we'll use that time to do a fun quiz. They wanted to do one on 70s music the other day, and someone's nan wanted to join. And this is time when the school has mandated that they don't actually need to engage directly with us, but that's there and that option. And just they're reading about things in the media and then asking for work and learning associated to that. Are they doing a lot of work? No. But is the rest of the state? No. But these are kids that would be sitting at home and lost and doing absolutely nothing, or wandering the streets with nothing during this time. Thanks, Steph.
Thank you, Zinni. Thanks. It gives us a bird's eye view into what happens. And for people who perhaps haven't been to the school, there's a separate house which is still on the school site. It's Chris, you'll be able to help me. It's a house, a little weatherboard house. It was pretty derelict for a long time. I think it was, who lived there, Chris? Yeah,
it was the groundsman, and then prior to that, it was a adjoining property. And back in the 70s, they paid $40,000 and acquired the land as well. And now we've got a cottage up the top, a cottage down the bottom, and our mainstream. So we've been fortunate. Our hands-on learning team of students, as part of our inclusion programs, to do hands-on work 1 day a week, renovated the entire house with the 2 workers. So we've got a space that's had student impact and voice and buy-in to developing. So that's where Zinni and the team operate out of.
Yeah. So and there's the movement between the mainstream and the house as appropriate. The mention of the money shouldn't go unnoted. The crazy rises in rentals and property prices and so on everywhere, but particularly, especially on the Mornington Peninsula, having really massive effects on a lot of the people in the programs that we work in. The housing is constantly a pressing issue in the region and comes into all aspects of education. It's a major crossover But perhaps, Cheryl, we could hear from you. Cheryl plays this fantastic role with the foundation. We're a tiny team. There's basically Beth who's there. Hi, Beth. Behind us, Beth and I and our CFO Gitz work together. And in order to, we have a very hands-on role though with the projects, and in order to do that, we need some more hands. And in this case, we have Cheryl Chappell, who works with us on the No Limits project, the Learning Enhancement, and Elevate, assisting with the monitoring and implementation and the data collection. And that's becoming much more and more important part of the work. A lot of what we're doing through the Victorian government partnership that I mentioned earlier is actually trying to understand how we can aggregate data over a set of data sets, whether they be in education or family wellbeing, housing, and so on. And because we fund a number of things within a small geographical region, it gives it a boundary within which to work, and the idea of gathering data across that boundary is much more reasonable than across the whole state, for example. So the data piece is getting more and more important, and we rely on Cheryl to do a lot of that. And perhaps, Cheryl, you could talk to us about what you find. I mean, and your experience in the education system is wonderful, and you bring in a huge amount of wisdom to all of this work. And I see you're chuckling there, David.
Yes. I was going to say that's because Cheryl's older than me.
I think David and I worked together for a very long time, Steph, in various ways. So I've done my over 40 years in the state government system, and I've at heart I'm still a teacher. I've been a principal. I've worked in the regional office and central office for significant periods of time over those years. And I've also worked with David and Julie, who I can see on the little screen today, at Oakwood. So I come to the project with kind of bring that sort of experience to the project, I suppose. And sometimes, in theory, I'm supposed to be supporting and helping with the monitoring. Sometimes I think I just ask some pesky questions and annoy people, but I guess for me, I've been involved over my career and in untold amount of initiatives around engaging young people in education. And mostly they haven't worked. And they haven't worked for various reasons. One is that they're quite often limited time projects done to people rather than people being able to scope them for themselves. The funding has sort of run out, or I think mainly the work has been much more complex than anybody has ever thought, which David alluded to. The other thing is most of those have been outside of the school or not attached to the school. And from my experience, my time at Oakwood, they had such success with students, you know, in re-engaging them and building some positivity about their future and the skills to be able to access that future. And so when I had the opportunity to think, I was working with the network of schools on the peninsula at the time, an opportunity to find a school who, you know, there's not one school on the peninsula that I could say to you that does more work than Western Port has done over years to try and engage students. They are, if Western Port were expelling a student, then you would know that they had done every single thing they could possibly do to hold that child into school. However, so with that kind of attitudes towards educating kids and having a relationship, or me having a relationship with a school that had been successful with that, it seemed sensible to say, well, let's have a go at it. Let's see if we can actually put put an Oakwood kind of model into Western Port to see how it would work. And I can't tell you how difficult it is. And the commitment of people at the school and around the table to do it is absolutely fantastic. But it's also, you go a few steps forward and then you go back a bit, a few steps forward and then you go back a bit. However, all the signs are incredibly promising around schools who can then change how they do things right across the mainstream to hold kids in is there. And so that's why we all stick with this project, I think, because it's showing that we don't actually have to lose the students lose the students to be able to bring them back. We actually, if we change things, do it differently, then we can hold them. But it does require a change from our side, I think. And that's what the school is incredibly reflective about, is all the things we have done. Of all the things we do, what are the things that we need to hold on to or to change so that they cater for our students better? And so it's not a teacher-centric school, it's actually a student-centric school. And I think that's fantastic. But I think I should stop now because people might want to ask questions.
Thank you, Cheryl. That's just so, I mean, it sounds logical, doesn't it? A student-centered school, but logic doesn't always pervade. And we have to be reminded of that sometimes. I think that it's the kids that totally matter. And as Chris would say, we seek to understand, not to be understood. Does anyone have any questions for our speakers?
I've got one. So Anthony Garner, work with the Beacon Foundation. Absolutely fantastic to be here and to hear the stories so far. What is seen as the biggest challenges, maybe one or two challenges over the next 5 years to make the next step of improvement on this journey that you've started and seem to be progressing well with?
Fantastic question, Anthony. Who'd like to answer that?
Yeah, I might start there and then the team can jump in afterwards. I think one of the big challenges for us has been with this new way of working with Oakwood and the philosophies that's kind of always been there, but now it's very deliberate, is the ownership of staff, Anthony, that it is our in my principal team, that we own the staff and we own their induction into the school. And as they come to us, this is the Western Port way that we do things. And if you're coming to us, you're joining into this journey. And if it's not for you and you're currently in the school, then it's probably time that we'll support you to go and have a look at somewhere else if your philosophies don't align with the work that we are doing, because we work beyond the boundaries of our school. So we do a really deliberate induction, myself and 2 assistant principals, and along with Matt from all the wellbeing aspect, induct every single staff member into the school and go through what it means to be part of the joining of the family. So I think bringing up the next challenge is going to be, how do we bring our staff authentically through that journey so that all of these things that we've got in place, the pillars of our professional development, our behaviour management through a classroom, Berry Street, seeking to understand rather than be understood, differentiation, personalised learning, how then, and the coaching goes behind that, how do you make sure that within a school that you've got that implemented with fidelity? It's all well and good to say you've got these pillars, but to walk from one classroom to the next and see that it's different is something we want to try to make sure is not there. And that's not easy. That is hard work to get 50 humans to make sure that they're all doing exactly the same thing in their different domains, in their different subject areas, at their different year levels, that is around this idea of those kind of main pillars that we've got there. So I see that as one of the big things within the school, is how do we keep the foot on the pedal? But as David said, we work with really tricky in a tricky context. So caring for our staff is really important at the same time. So you've got to balance, the pressure about what we've got to do and the compelling reason to be doing it against making sure you look after people so that they remain at your school. Because you start to invest in them, you invest in them cognitively, you invest in them, in their social aspect of joining the school and being part of it, is to try and make sure that if you come to Western Port, we've got you for a good chunk of time and we're going to invest and do this journey together. That's a big piece of work for us. So the human aspect of what we're trying to do, the personnel component's really important for us. I might let the rest of the team make sure that we've covered the most important parts and see if there's anything else that they feel from a project perspective that one of the other drivers for Anthony.
Well, I guess I'll have a shot. And if we're thinking of a horizon of 5 years ahead, to remember that it's not simple, it's complex. And so it's all got to be held together whilst it's being developed. And there's so many aspects. Western Port Secondary College is much more complicated than Oakwood School because we focus on disengaged young people. Western Port's focusing on all the young people. So, for example, Year 12 scores and results are really important for Chris and Western Port Secondary College. I don't have to worry about that because that's not my priority. So on a 5-year trajectory, thinking about how do we hold all this together and keep doing what we're doing. So Chris talked about cultural change and staff change. I always like to say we ask our kids to change and they're great at it, but the adults are not so great at it. So supporting the adults to change. And then as you go through this and we realise we can do great things for our disengaged kids, I think the penny drops to say, well, this actually works for every kid. It's not just going to work for the disengaged kids, it's going to work for the high-flying kids too. So if I say we've got a personalised learning plan, we've got the kids interested in their learning, they're getting help when they need it, we've got career aspirations and people working around the young person to help them move forward, that's going to work for your ACE kid as well as it's going to work for the kids who are dropping out of school. So that realisation that this is actually bigger than we originally thought, and let's just keep going with it.
That's fantastic, David. I think that's the whole point of this is what you're doing with the kids who are in this cohort is actually what education should be, and that's the message we need to get across to the people further up the chain. Zoe, you've got a question.
Hello all, Zoe McKenzie here. I'm just really curious about what success looks like in the ultimate destination. Is it a job, an apprenticeship, you know, staying local, moving away? What does success look like?
I might start with that one again and let the team jump in afterwards. I think for us, you know, we're about the individual pathway that best suits the young person. I think you've got to be, you know, we're not set about to try and be, you know, a high-performing academic school because that's our purpose. Our purpose is about personalising what the outcome needs to be for our young person. So if it's Jake Seymour, who Zinni was referring to before, that goes and gets his diesel mechanic apprenticeship, and that's a really positive pathway. Amazing, that's fantastic. The key aspects though of making sure that all the foundational components to give that young person the pathway towards success are there, and that academic ability is a really key component of it. That doesn't matter what that pathway ends up being for me. It is about that they've got the foundational skills, they've come to it from primary into secondary, and ideally we've engaged them to stick the path for the senior certificate. But for some of our young people, that's just not realistic. It's not their pathway, and completing that senior certificate doesn't quite make it. So off to make sure that they've got an apprenticeship, further educational training. But ultimately, if we can get them to that senior certificate, that's our aim. And then we know that their pathways increase, their outcomes increase, their financial remuneration increases across their lifetime, their health outcomes are improved. So as much as we can the senior certificate, but like David said, not getting to VCE outcomes at Oakwood is not as high on the priority list as making sure they've got a pathway. For kids in the Elevate program, it is really about getting them into a positive pathway that was never going to happen. So probably,
that's good.
If you're interested, I can give you the response from Oakwood School about destination. So I'm just going to show you that. I know you can't see it, but I'm looking at a circle graph of 1,124 students who have left Oakwood School over the last 10 years. And we do this every year, and it always turns out to be about the same. So 20% of the kids go back to school, and that's interesting because that's not really our goal. Our goal is to engage kids with our school. Another 12% would go on to some sort of training. 17% have gone to TAFE. 10% have gone to employment. 2% to apprenticeships and training. Another 4% is for other educational settings. That adds up to 61%. And then when I add 10% on for kids who are working, looking for work, so I've got 71% of our kids who are actively doing something positive after they've left us. So we see that as a very positive outcome from kids who were completely disengaged when we met them. Then you might be interested in the other 30%, I suppose. So working from the other end, 7% have gone missing. We don't know where they are, so we can't talk to them. Another 6% don't want to talk to us, so we can't talk to them. And then get it right. Unemployed, not looking for work, 9%. So there's around about 25% who are basically not doing anything too positive. And then the other few percentages are taken up with people who are doing things like, once I said having a baby, and I was challenged over that because that's actually a very positive thing to do, but I didn't necessarily have it on my positive list at that age for the young person, but doing other wellbeing type things.
And can I just talk to Elevate, and that's what David reminds me of. Elevate, we've got some students that they don't want to be like their mothers, some girls that just don't want to have copious amounts of children, and they want something more for their lives. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but like we said, we've got Jake in his apprenticeship at 15. I have one student who's in year 10 who hardly went to school at all in year 8, and this is her second school. Last year she began with Elevate. Now she's in year 10. Not only is she engaging with Elevate, but she's doing a vet course and going to Somerville Secondary 1 day a week to do early childhood education and doing a placement in a childcare. And that's huge from somebody that's so anxious and not willing to engage anywhere. And I've got another student who was painfully shy and had a bad experience at the local school and now engages with Elevate. And she's got an Indigenous background, and she's been doing an SBAT this year in business studies with Somerville Police Station, and that's opened up a world for her, whether she wants to be in business or in law enforcement, and just those sort of opportunities that are catered towards them. And I've got a student that's in year 9 who's determined that she's going to be a lawyer, and you know, she asks us often, do you think we can? And we said, with all your interest in social justice and everything else and your academic ability, why not? Like, go for it. So yeah, it's very individual pathways, and we will encourage them. We've got another student who's kind of pre-expulsion, and he comes in normally once a day on site with me, and he's working towards a white card so that he can get work when, age permits, because he's not going to do his VCE, but he wants to have that sort of stability.
Thanks, Cindy. So I think success comes in many shapes and sizes. Look, we're nearly out of time. Emily's got a question. Would you like just to quickly ask that, Emily? And then we're pretty close to time, I'm afraid.
Thank you. I'm happy if you want to hold it off for another time, but I was just curious. Thank you so much for all the presentations. Chris, in yours, you had talked about the tiers of vulnerability, and tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3. And I know we all have shudders of that with COVID, but I was just interested to hear how you do that. And
yeah, no worries. I'll touch on it quick. It's actually part of the portfolio that we've developed for Matt. So Matt will know this one well as well. So this year, our teams, what we found was we've had young people sitting on lists that nothing was being done for them. They were too hard basket, and teams are starting to lose the fact that the pathway and the action that was going to happen. So we put in place a inclusion team, which was mapping every student. So on a 3 weekly basis, year level teams have to record all their data, their attendance data. They go with the wellbeing team about whether they're engaged with wellbeing or not. We look at their academic progress on a 5-weekly basis, so that feeds into the assessments, and we look at whether there's any external factors or social vulnerabilities there. All of that feeds into a vulnerability category of whether they're in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and the tier 3 kids are, referred into Elevate programs, outreach, any external programs or internal programs that we've got. And a team of panel members come together to kind of brainstorm what we can do for those tier 3 kids. So every 3 weeks, we've got eyes on the kids to see if they've changed from a tier 1 to a tier 2 or a tier 2 to a tier 3, or in the great circumstances, we've seen them go from tier 3 down to tier 2 or 2 into 1 because we've put actions in place to support them. So it's a matrix color-coded system that is looked at on a 3-weekly basis and then mapped at a panel. I know we're short of time, but Matt, did you want to add anything to that?
Just Emily, one way to really think of it for yourself is tier 3 is, I'll go from tier 1. Tier 1 is whole school, what you do for all students and the impacts and processes and programs you do for that. Tier 2 is around group support, so what you can do for a group of students in similar ways. And tier 3 is around individualized support. So the really pointy end, I really need to individualize things in this instance. So that would be the tier 3. So that's how the process kind of looks.
Thank you. That's great. Appreciate that.
Helpful. So there's a lot of science behind all of this. We talk about the science of reading now with all the work we're doing in No Limits and the learning enhancement, which also comes into Elevate. And I think there's a lot of science behind the whole thing, but ultimately this is about people. Every single bit of it is about people, and having the people work together, the common values and aspirations. And we have an amazing group of people in the Western Port area that is working together to really support all of the children and young people in this area for the bigger aspirations. So we don't want postcodes to define a child's future. And we're working together with this team, which is a great privilege. I'd like to thank everyone for coming, thank our speakers very much, thank all of our supporters, thank our board. Particular thanks, Ian, you're here today. It's great to see you here. Can't hear you. Just on mute.
I've been on mute the whole time. I was just going to say that I think that Chris and David and Cheryl and Zinni and Matt and everyone else is just doing a fantastic job. And on behalf of MPF, I'm so pleased that you're all so incredibly enthusiastic and doing so well with a bit of our support. So well done.
Thanks, Ian. It's fantastic.
Thanks, Ian.
Okay, and we'll keep you posted with updates here and there. And anyone who's got any questions or anything, please get in touch. We're always open to ideas and feedback and love to hear from you. Thanks again for coming.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.